Hi, everyone. I'm Bob Bowman, Editor-in-Chief of Supply Chain Brain, and I want to welcome you to this webinar presentation on direct procurement, your strategic advantage, presented by E2Open. One quick housekeeping note before we get started. There will be a question and answer session at the end of the presentation. Audience members are encouraged to submit their questions at any time during the presentation by clicking on that Q&A icon or button at the bottom of your screen. With that, I want to introduce today's speaker. She is Lori Harner, Senior Director of Product Marketing at E2Open. Lori has worked in the technology and software industry for over 20 years. During that time, she's held various strategy, marketing, and leadership roles and has cross-industry experience with ERP, CRM, HCM, and supply chain solutions. And so with that, I want to turn it over to Lori Harner. Lori, take it away.
Thank you, Bob. We're going to kick today's session off with our a polling question. So I'd like to propose a polling question here real quickly. And it is, would you consider your direct procurement business processes operational or strategic? So we'll take the first couple minutes here for everyone on the webinar today to go ahead and answer. Wow, those are very interesting results, with 47% saying operational and about half and half, so 53 saying strategic. Great, so let's go ahead and kick it off. Thank you for everyone for answering the poll. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and kick off today's webinar with talking about a few market trends that we've seen across the industry and how they affect direct procurement. So over the past about 10 years, there's been a substantial increase in outsourcing across all industries. And so we ran a survey a while back that brought up a couple different results. And so at that time, 75% of industries and companies told us they were downstreaming or they were outsourcing their downstream operations, with 85% saying they were outsourcing their upstream operations, and about 65%, which is what we're calling sideways, or their logistics operations. Since that time of that particular survey, we have seen an increase in logistics outsourcing, which has brought us up to about 85%. So with the continuation in outsourcing, businesses are taking and seeing quite some substantial cost benefits, as well as other benefits as it relates to outsourcing their business processes. However, what this does long-term is it leaves companies with a patchwork of disparate systems. So disparate systems, disparate data, which is really the root cause of today's supply chain inefficiencies, is what we're seeing. So what we see is, again, on the right-hand side here, a very complex supply chain organization. And we're not only bringing data in now, we're exchanging data within the four walls of our business, but also with a variety of trading partners due to the outsourcing trend. And so from that, what happens is that we're bringing in data, unstructured, structured, et cetera, basically that is coming in from a variety of different sources. And so what we have is the ability to take that data and utilize it when applicable. But what we're finding is that the data is becoming quite siloed. In often cases, it's latent data, it's unstructured data, it's data that's not usable. And so kind of orchestrating all of those moving parts has become more difficult. In addition, customers have told us that there's really this lack of visibility and control. They need visibility into all aspects of their supply chain, and how are they able to get that dealing with all of these variety of trading partners across multiple ecosystems. And then in addition to that, they're telling us that too many times the data that they are receiving is maybe what we would call dirty data, or data that's not usable. So Again, many, many benefits to outsourcing, but also with that comes complexity. As a result, direct procurement teams have been telling us as well that they're also processes that became very fragmented, and it's very hard to get decision grade data to make decisions off of. And so when you times that by the environments today with more and more outsourcing, you really can multiply this by thousands of trading partners. And many customers that we've talked to do have, not only on the supplier side of the business, but also on the logistics side, and the channel, their distributors have a variety of complexities when it comes to gathering all the data that they need to make informed decisions. And so what they've also told us is that this puts a lot of pressure on increased operating costs, increased inventory cost, and also missed revenue. So when we look at operating costs, really today, being used to working in the four walls of the business, it's been very enterprise centric. But they have multiple systems, as I mentioned earlier, multiple manual processes, and they find themselves expediting shipments, not getting the components in that they need to make their finished goods, et cetera. The other area is inventory costs, right? With the lack of visibility and control comes the lack of inventory visibility, which means there could be excesses, there could be inventory held overages. There's not this concept of right sizing the inventory. And again, missed revenues. And this comes from things like stockouts, late deliveries, et cetera. So although again, benefits in outsourcing, what customers are telling us is we need an operating platform to help us bring all of these moving parts together. And so again, they're looking for one place in the cloud to run direct procurement. And so as we look at the overarching kind of the flexibility or the myriad of challenges that businesses are telling us they need, again, it boils down to kind of four main areas. So if we look at operating costs, again, the ability to automate not only all of your procure to pay processes, but even starting out if you're in a different part of your journey, automating earlier parts of your procurement process. So automating your end-to-end P2P, improving your overall logistics and productivity. They want to be able to ensure that suppliers are working in collaboration and lockstep with them. So you're building that supplier insurance. And a lot of companies are coming to us and saying, you know, we've got this disparate procurement process. We really want to find the niche on centralizing our procurement so that we can take advantage of the benefits that come along with centralized procurement. When we move into inventory costs, we're really looking at, again, excesses, overages, and being able to right size the inventory. Overall, it's gaining control when we move on to the more strategic side of, you know, again, improving our margins, right? So along with margins comes quality, compliance, making sure your costs are rolled up and that they're accurate. So when you're paying invoices and you're doing the matching, things are in sync and in lockstep when it comes to cost management. And then ultimately customer loyalty. Our brands are telling us it's really important for us, especially now in the very, very competitive world of omni-channel, multi-channel, and all of the different venues that we have to purchase goods, that we maintain our customer loyalty and customer service. And this means we've got to get our products to our customers, our finished goods, at the right place, the right time, right? So overall, these are the kind of the four main buckets that customers are telling us that is where they're struggling within their direct procurement. So what we've done is we've taken this and put it into a variety of maturity stages. So again, we service customers and we see customers in all variations of maturity. When you look at the manual processes, we still have a lot of companies that are using spreadsheets and invoices in Word, et cetera. And that's okay. I mean, we consider that very opportunistic area. It's stage 1 and 2. It's manual processes. But in the conversations that we have, we really see our customers wanting to move up in the maturity stage or in their journey, move up in the maturity curve. And so what that usually entails is moving into stage 3, which is some automation. You're working with single tiers. You're maybe doing, one-to-one discrete orders. There's not a lot of complexity. You've got some configuration and some built-in workflows to help transition off some of those manual processes into automation. When you move into stage 4, this is really what we're considering the multi-tier stage. This is when you're dealing with multiple tiers of suppliers across multiple sites, right? So you need to have the visibility and control across your entire procurement network. which means in many cases, this could include something like, I'm dealing with blanket orders and I'm dealing with vendor managed inventory on those blanket orders. So for instance, I need to set up some min-max levels and be able to ensure that my suppliers are able to meet my min-max levels and be able to distribute my inventory when I need it. So at that point, at the vendor managed scenario with the blanket order, that's when I take liability for that inventory, right? So when you get into more complexities, scheduling agreements, blanket orders, different logistics complexities, you need more of that orchestration, centralization, and workflow in this particular stage. And a lot of what is needed here is really that visibility into these multiple tiers of suppliers. We have companies out there that are onboarding and dealing with thousands of suppliers. So as you can imagine, the complexity growing from that stage 3 single tier to where you're dealing with not only more suppliers, more logistics providers, more trading partners, but also the complexity that comes with managing and orchestrating very complex processes when it comes to procurement. And then as we transition through the journey here on maturity stage 5, this is really where we see companies, I saw that 53% as we opened considered themselves strategic. So they have a place where they're saying to themselves, I can manage my costs very effectively. I can manage everything from the assembly to all the suppliers that I'm working with so that when I'm rolling up the cost to the finished goods, I have an accurate way to pay invoices, right? They're also maybe working with spot pricing. And so they're purchasing large volumes, I should say, of components from certain suppliers and perhaps drop shipping them to their contract manufacturers or to their other, to warehouses or wherever that needs to be done. So we see a lot of strategic examples that we've talking to with customers, but very few customers have reached that stage 5, but they're wanting to because they want to become, more of a strategic center than just operational. I'm purchasing raw materials or ingredients to build out component or to build out finished goods. So again, this is kind of how we bucket it. I'll be talking a lot about this maturity cycle as we go through our interview coming up here, but just wanted to set the stage. So what we see is a lot of our customers too, they're requiring a comprehensive solution. They want one operating platform to actually manage their direct procurement processes. And this starts with connectivity, right? A connectivity to a large multi-enterprise network. This helps them to reduce their time to value to their customers. They need that visibility and control across their end-to-end supply chain. So when you're corresponding with sharing forecasts or, understanding what the supplier can commit to, knowing where your advanced shipping notices are coming in, knowing when you're going to receive the goods, how many you're going to receive, having that visibility. And that comes with this decision grade data and having the ability to not only deal with your 1, 2, and 3 suppliers, but also a growing trend in the customers that we're talking to is dealing with long tail suppliers, the suppliers that are selling, very specialized components or ingredients for the end-to-end product. And a lot of those suppliers, the long tail suppliers, don't necessarily have access to, very sophisticated EDI systems or whatever it might be. So wanting a system that can bring in that unstructured data, maybe it's via email or an invoice form via Word, and putting structure around that data, just like you would work with your tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. And what we get from this visibility and control is really the benefits of the shared investment between the collaboration between the brand owner, the contract manufacturing and suppliers, or any other trading partners that are in that business process. And then again, they're requiring flexibility, agile, configurable workflows. They want to be able to move their direct procurement into a digital transformation state. And that means moving it from either, stage 1, 2, or 3 into that 4 and 5 category. When we dig deeper, a little bit deeper here into, let me see here. Okay, we dig deeper a little bit into connectivity. What we're looking for is cross-functional, cross-enterprise, and cross-ecosystem. Oftentimes, when we're talking to customers, they're telling us, we need to go outside the 4 walls of our business, but how do you do that without a network, right? So as you're looking into not only the right side of dealing with your partner or your supplier ecosystem, many of our customers are also wanting to have full connectivity to their channel or their distributors. If you're dealing with a distributor like a Ingram Micro or a Best Buy or whomever's in your channel, you want visibility into that demand as well, right? Not just your point of sale demand, but also your distributor demand. So that requires connectivity into your channel ecosystem. In addition, the logistics ecosystem, like I mentioned earlier, is becoming very important as it grows in outsourcing. Having that visibility and control into where's my stuff, right? Where is my inventory becomes more important. And then of course, across the areas, if you're dealing globally, you have to have visibility into global trade, tariffs, what's happening in your global trade environment. So again, the kind of roundup here is that, you know, your supply chain doesn't stop at the edge of your enterprise. So why should your direct procurement tools, correct? So again, this is all around getting the data you need, making it decision grade, and making it usable for your end-to-end applications. As we look at the visibility and control, as you can see on the right-hand side, this is a pretty standard direct procurement business flow. But when you start adding the complexity of dealing with multiple tiers of suppliers or trading partners, the visibility and control become more important. So you need that at every stage of your supply chain or your direct procurement processes. You also need to have the ability to rapidly onboard and source suppliers. Now more than ever, I think it's becoming very important that onboarding suppliers is a quick process. Because if you do have to swap a supplier out or onboard a new supplier to meet those component requirements, especially with the major disruptions that are happening across the globe, that becomes even more important and more critical. But we talk a lot about disruptions in a lot of these webinars, but we know that businesses go through day-to-day disruptions and day-to-day issues that need to be resolved quickly. So having the ability to have a 3-step or 2-step process to onboard suppliers and to vet and source suppliers is incredibly important. You also want to be able to streamline your processes. Again, a lot of our customers are dealing with millions of transactions on a weekly or monthly basis. This is really important to be able to orchestrate all of those moving parts. And again, as we go through this, this becomes very important as you extend across multiple tiers. The other component I want to call out here is really around having prescriptive analytics. I know we hear a lot about prescriptive analytics, but the importance really comes down to the point that businesses now only want to deal with exceptions. And they want to be able to take trending data and machine learning and artificial intelligence and put it to use so that we're only dealing with exceptions so that we can transition from more of an operational process to a strategic. And then lastly here around flexibility, I've kind of built this on the same type of diagram or maturity flow. It's important as you're starting your journey to have that collaboration, and that's kind of the baseline along with the performance, right? So proactively aligning your supply with your demand when you're sharing forecast information with suppliers, building up those supplier relationships so that you can build up the assurance and making sure that you're getting the components and the ingredients when you need them to build out your finished goods. And then again, the collaboration across all these trading partners that are working in lockstep for shared value. As you move into performance, it's really around that automation side, is the flexibility to be able to automate your procure to pay process. And oftentimes we talk to customers and we just want to automate everything. And it's really more of a phased approach when you're looking at automations is what are the first things you can automate in your procure to pay. And as that complexity grows, so does the complexity of the operations of automation. So we also want to we know that ERP plays a really big part in integration in our integration story. So we want to be able to integrate to any ERP system and have the ability to be able to issue our payments and in a lot of cases our purchase order documents out of the ERP, but not have it disrupt the overarching orchestration of what you're doing in procurement. Again, lowering those inventory risks as well as delivering on time and in full. As we move to the right-hand side with orchestration, we're looking at really around the whole centralization of your procurement, being able to reach across multiple tiers, handle those more complex scenarios when it comes to vendor managed inventory or vendor managed replenishment, blanket orders, multiple discrete orders, et cetera. And then also that prescriptive analytics. And then the continuous improvement side of the flexibility really does come into play when you're doing more of those strategic processes where you're managing your costs more effectively, you're doing some strategic buying, you're being able to drop ship components directly to your contract manufacturers, et cetera. So again, these kind of three components kind of wrap up my presentation for the day, but we're going to also move into a discussion with Bob coming up here. But this is at the time I'd like to remind you, please submit your questions using the Q&A feature, and we'll get to those at the end. But for now, I will open it up for one more polling question, and you're gonna see something a little bit similar here. After sitting through this, what is, I'm gonna ask the same question, after hearing some of this presentation, would you consider your direct procurement operational or strategic? So I'll ask that everyone answer that question again, and then we'll talk about it a little bit more when we get into Bob and I's discussion and when we get into some of the chat questions, okay?
Are we giving the audience a couple minutes, a couple seconds here, Lori?
Absolutely, yeah, you bet.
Okay, before we get started.
Okay, so pretty close to the same answer. I think we've got a few more attendees on here. So again, 42% said operational, which is good, and 58 said strategic. So we've got people and participants and attendees that are doing a little bit of both, which is great to hear.
Yeah. Okay, so here indeed we do kick off the question, the grilling of Lori portion of our presentation. Let me start by asking you to kind of go back to the subject of market trends affecting direct procurement teams. Maybe you could sum those up again for us today and go into a little bit more detail.
Sure, absolutely. So again, traditionally, I mean, I've worked in procurement for a long time, and I think procurement teams, really had one goal in mind, direct procurement, that is, and that is to acquire, materials and ingredients for finished goods at the most optimal cost. And that's a great goal to have. But as we see with the complexities that we talked about with outsourcing growing exponentially over the last probably 10 years, it becomes more complex and due to that outsourcing. So oftentimes our companies that are talking to us are dealing with thousands of suppliers and thousands of, or probably hundreds of different sites. So then now we see that lead times are tighter, competitive pressure is out there, there's a lot of merger and acquisition going on. And so these dynamics not only present complexity, but they do present opportunities for direct procurement departments, right? So there's a way that they can reevaluate their strategy and move into more of a kind of a journey or a path per se, depending on where they're at in that maturity curve. So again, these dynamics require basically a new way of thinking about direct procurement, if you will, and its potential. So again, by using direct procurement strategically, you can enable that agility, and we hear this a lot, right? Agility and resiliency to capture growths, but also to capture growth opportunities while you're managing risk. Like I said before, companies don't just deal once in a lifetime with drastic disruptions, but they're dealing with complexities on a day-to-day. So as we see now, we see direct procurement teams orchestrating everything from onboarding thousands of suppliers across these multiple tiers to collaborating with trading partners across those ecosystems I talked about before. And then all of this remaining, staying in sync on all purchase order details, and then kind of resorting back to, there is the crutch of direct procurement, which is making sure your purchase orders align to your shipments, your receipts, your invoicing, being able to complete that 4 to 5 way matching process, but having an integrated platform to do so on, right? So you want to be able to orchestrate and collaborate and be able to trust that you're still going back to paying on time and in full and being compliant. So there's a lot, I know when we talk about invoicing, a lot of regulations and compliance and around invoicing, as well as a variety of different taxing, taxing issues, et cetera. So having that orchestration is become more and more important.
Great. Another question I think that asks you to drill down a little bit more into points that you started to make, and that is, what are some business objectives that direct procurement teams want to achieve?
Right, absolutely. So again, I'm going to go back to the power of 4 today, but it's lowering the operating costs is number one. And usually how they do that is through automation. They help reduce through automation. So this helps reduce their spend for direct materials And they ensure that they're working collaboratively with not only their suppliers, but their other trading partners to build up that supplier insurance. The second thing is lowering inventory costs. We look at right sizing our inventory, right? No one wants too much or not excess or less inventory, and they don't want to have obsolete inventory. As we see in today, we can hear in the news all the time, the shortage on inventory is becoming really, really important. And it's not only affecting the consumer, but also B2B, right? So when we talked about the customer loyalty, I have a good example, but it's more of a consumer example, but you can kind of put yourself into the shoes on a B2B example. So about 2 weeks ago, my refrigerator quit. Right, so my refrigerator quit, and I don't know if anyone has had that experience before, but you're really you're not only getting rid of a lot of waste, right, because everything's melted in your refrigerator, but I thought, this will be an easy fix, but I couldn't find service for one thing, which is not always the issue, but it was finding the part to fix my refrigerator. Parts were, it required a compressor. There was no inventory for compressors. I was struggling, so I went out to buy a new fridge. Then I was actually hit with a logistics problem. I could buy the fridge, but it couldn't be delivered for 4 weeks. Well, I don't know about anybody on the call, but being without a refrigerator for 4 weeks gives me angst. But if you turn that around and you look at the chip shortage, right, with B2B, it's the same thing. Customers that are looking, car dealers or high tech that are looking to provide customer service and the best satisfaction to their customers are having to quickly pivot and do work with other shortages and work with other vendors and suppliers to make sure that they can make their customers satisfied. Because as we know, during the pandemic, everyone needs a laptop, right? Everyone needs a laptop, and now with the economy somewhat coming back, people are looking at purchasing new cars, and there's no new cars on the lots, right? So again, these all kind of play into fact, the inventory, lower inventory costs, making sure you have inventory, maintaining your customer loyalty, and then of course, improving your margins by gaining full control into your bill of material costs and reducing that non-compliance of addressing any quality issues that might, affect the end product going into the hands of the consumer. Okay.
Well, thanks for reminding us, Lori, that when we're at home, we are all procurement professionals in one way or another. Okay. What advice would you give direct procurement teams to help address these objectives?
I always I want to leave the audience with maybe just a new, kind of a few words, right? New strategy, new technology as you're looking, right? Because both of them kind of go hand in hand as you're looking to advance your direct procurement strategy. So again, the level of agility to capture these growth opportunities, plus the resiliency to manage risk, if we're going to use those two words, I think that's a good way to put it into perspective, right? It requires this new way of thinking about direct procurement and its potential, right? So again, direct procurement teams need to be able to do everything from orchestrate, onboarding thousands of suppliers, to collaborating across these multiple tiers, and ensuring that all parties with shared value stay in lockstep on all of the purchase order details and following it down to the payment. And this really comes at managing your risk at every stage of the process. And so as I look at, really being able to grow in the maturity curve or manage these strategic capabilities, what our customers are asking us for is one platform to be able to do this, like one operating platform, right? That integrates seamlessly to my ERP, because we know the ERP needs to be used for certain processes, but also being able to have the visibility and control over all of those processes.
Thanks a lot for that. So earlier you talked, Lori, about the stages of maturity, and this question asked you to go deeper into that that you mentioned in your presentation. I'm wondering if perhaps you might be able to give like a use case for each of those stages.
Sure, absolutely. So again, we do talk to customers at every stage of maturity. So again, using spreadsheets and invoices and Word invoices isn't going away. I mean, we still have customers that are coming to us in that 1 to 2 stage and saying, between stages 1 and 2, and saying, we're really looking at automating. Or we had one customer, very, very large CPG company, come to us and say, all we want is a KPI dashboard of all of our advanced shipping notices. Well, in discussing with them, it was really a little bit more than that. But as they started to look at where's the biggest crutch of our process breakdown or our pain point, it was in having visibility and control over advanced shipping notices. And again, this is a very large CPG company. So again, a lot of this was being done manually, right? So then there are really opportunistic opportunities there. These are really considered opportunistic to say, okay, well, let's look at your entire procurement process. How do we get that? KPI is fairly easy to get, right? So we can get it using our network, but we have to go back and say, what is really the crutch of the problem? And then what it did is it boiled into stage 3, which is that automation stage. Very simple, complex processes, right? Not everybody has a very complex process with their procurement. But with that said, they may be looking at it like we just need to exchange discrete purchase orders. That's it. We need to just do that, exchange some forecast information, and that's fine. But they're utilizing automation to do that in stage 3. And they're typically looking to transition from that basic automation into moving beyond the standard workflows into stage 4. And this is where the complexity comes into place, where they're dealing with multiple tiers, multiple sites, blanket orders, advanced shipping notices. It could be scheduling agreements. Maybe they're using a scheduling agreement as the PO, right? So they're using a different format, and they're booking all of their deliveries based on a schedule. Perhaps they're working with long tail suppliers. Like a good example is a cosmetic company that is needing to purchase lavender from a lavender farm in South Dakota, right? So I happen to be from the Midwest. Sometimes that comes out in my speak and my talk, but I do know that there's lavender farmers in South Dakota. So with that said, that lavender farmer doesn't have access to fancy EDI systems, and so they're corresponding with this large major cosmetics manufacturer brand with purchase orders, the same way their tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 are. And so they need to be able to be onboarded quickly. They need to be able to send a document, a PO, whatever it may be, in the format that they do. Maybe it's an email, right? And so they need a system that can put structure around that purchase order and all that unstructured data and make it usable within the application. So again, more complexity. And then when we get into the multi-tier, stage 5 complexity, really, again, around that being more strategic, being able to manage your costs that roll up into your bill of materials, being able to strategically, price out or price shop for suppliers, purchase large volumes of quantities from your suppliers, drop ship them to a warehouse or to a manufacturing site to kind of eliminate that middle market or that mid-market, or I should say the middleman logistics costs. So.
That's some great insight, Lori, about the stages of automation, because as you know, companies today are under so much pressure to achieve digitization and automation of all their processes. And it can seem overwhelming if they don't understand, as you've laid out here, the necessity for those stages as you go in that direction. With that in mind, we have a question here that asks you to elaborate more on the technology aspect of what you're talking about here.
Sure. So again, no matter where you are in your procurement journey, choosing the right enabling technology is really crucial to achieving your competitive advantage. And so you need to really look for a solution provider that brings all of the essentials of your direct procurement functions and operations together on a single platform. It's connected to things like your global trading partner network. You need to have that data, right? Data's king at this point. And having that data, but not only having data, but being able to wrap structure around that data, normalize that data, make it decision grade so that it can be used within your applications. And then in today's world, everyone's looking and talking about artificial intelligence, right? I always suggest talk to a solution provider that has field proven artificial intelligence. Ask them to show you some use cases, ask them to show some examples about automation and AI, because eventually you do want the system to be able to, you want to trust the system enough to be able to only deal with those exceptions, right? So you're dealing with artificial intelligence can help you get to that point. The machine learning can help you get to that point, and it can move you further along the line in that digital transformation journey.
Thank you. What are some fundamentals that companies should consider? Maybe you could expand on that.
Sure. So I'm going to align it to a few things. So we're talking about visibility. We're talking about data, gaining that end-to-end visibility through the entire supply network, including your long tail suppliers. Data, again, is really important. And how do you get that data? How do you get that data? How do you bring that data into your system? And how do you make sense of that data? There's so much data out there in the ecosystems today that you really have to consider, how do you get your data? How do you make sense of the data? How do you basically see the issue, understand the issue, act on the issue, and let the system learn for next time. So data, number one, being able to get the data from multiple tiers. And if you've got a large trading network with thousands of trading partners already, that makes it a little bit easier, because you're able to access that network and say, oh, I see the supplier, I can just onboard them with, in a very timely manner, rapid onboarding. The next thing is efficiency, and that's when we talk about applications. So establishing more effective processes by streamlining your labor-intense workflows, right? So you're increasing your productivity, you're driving your new efficiencies, and having the data normalized for those applications to be able to use so that you can make informed decisions is really important. The other thing I want to make sure people understand is the compliance issues, right? Being able to make sure that you're in compliance. So, I mean, even from a financial perspective, you've got compliant invoices, you're working with compliant suppliers, that you're meeting overall that compliancy and that efficiency issue. The third thing I would say would be collaboration. This becomes more and more important when you're collaborating across a variety of trading partners, making sure that everybody's on the same page and working in lockstep together, because everybody has a shared value in that process, right? So a supplier wants to make sure that they're supplying accurately and on time and in full, and the brand wants to make sure that they can trust that supplier and that logistics provider, or whatever it might be, to give them the data that they need to streamline that process. And again, if you look at the channel or the demand side of the house, you're really looking at understanding that your forecasts are accurate, so you're sharing the right forecasting and demand with your suppliers, kind of building the bridge between demand and supply. The last thing would be your strategic areas, and again, that would be around cost effectiveness. Achieving those economies of scale through enhanced profitability through centralized procurement of raw materials. You can reduce shipping time and costs using the drop ship functionalities that you may have. Again, collaborating with your co-packers, manufacturers, your suppliers, and having this streamlined workflow where everybody's in lockstep and everybody that is involved in that particular build can say, okay, we know exactly where we're at, and we know where we're falling short, or we know where we're gaining, economies of scale. So really important to look at maybe those four things, right?
We still have a few more minutes for questions. So as we're answering these last ones, audience members, please continue to submit those questions by clicking on that Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. How can a network help me onboard my suppliers quickly?
Yep. So if you have access to a trading partner network, the benefit there is that these network connections have already been established. So they're one-to-many versus a one-to-one approach, right? So they're one-to-many. So if I'm a laptop manufacturer, for instance, I can actually say, okay, I'm pretty sure that my competitors might be using these same types of suppliers, right? You have access to onboard these suppliers very quickly, because the network already has them set up and ready to go. So we have one customer, a large, it's basically a large manufacturer that deals with large, like tractors and large, machinery equipment. And they literally came to us with a challenge that, they wanted to onboard 10,000 suppliers, and they wanted to do it quickly because they knew they had to start utilizing the suppliers for different avenues, different use cases, et cetera. And the reason they chose to come to a network provider is because they knew they could do that very seamlessly, because a lot of the connections were already established, right? So I hope that answered the question. There's a lot of benefits to network that I could go into. I think I talked a little bit about them as we talked through the transitioning from maturity 4 to 5. But again, that's just another example of how a network can help.
I like this next question. How do you balance the risks for the supply chain when we think that the lean strategy asks for single sourcing for customized products in order to achieve a better product design or product cost?
Right. So I think as you look at that, the streamlined process, as we think about it, worked in a single tier environment. I think that works, and that's a lot of people have made that work in a cost-effective hooking one-to-one. But as disruptions happen and more risk adversity is put on the customer or on the brand, you're looking to say, I've got to have options, right? I have to understand what I do and what I'm going to do in this particular disruption scenario. And then again, as I mentioned earlier, the ability to see what's going on in your network of supply chain, being able to understand what's going on, being able to collaborate with those trading partners, act on the disruption quickly, and then learn for next time. I think that's really important. And so as you go through the process as evaluating risk, you're going to look at, okay, where are my biggest risks? And what do I need to do to address those proactively? And that's where some of the prescription comes in. The prescriptive analytics is saying, okay, I knew what I did this time. I had to go to an alternate supplier, or I had to do a materials move. It's more of your, if you will, your control tower scenario, right? Your control tower capabilities scenario, and leveraging that end-to-end supply chain visibility and control to make those decisions and to reduce that risk. I hope I answered the question okay.
I think you did. Another good one. What is the first step in moving from tactical to strategic?
Yes, and I think this is a great one. Everyone is on a journey, right? So everyone has to sit back and evaluate where they're at in their maturity and where they're at in their journey. What is it that you want to achieve? What is your, what is the shared value between not only your departmental goals, but your company goals, your executive goals, right? And that will help transition. And I think everyone moves at a different pace. And again, I'll go back to, some of the scenarios that our customers will come to us are very simplistic. I just want to move this particular process from tactical to automated or strategic. And it's a process that we walk through not only with some of our strategic partners in the mix as well, but also understanding the challenges of where they're at. And you can take something as simple as I need to have, a KPI for all of my advanced shipping notices, which turns into a very, very much larger business process where you're saying, okay, now we can see what the breakdown is and why you need that visibility when you need it. But it also comes from these adjacent parts that happen at the front of the cycle and at the end of the cycle as well.
Thanks a lot. Okay, so we use spreadsheets for some of our processes, says this questioner. That's a surprise. How can we start moving off these manual processes?
That's a really good question. So in my bio, I didn't go into in detail, but I used to work for Microsoft, and I did not work in the office team, but I worked for Microsoft on the enterprise resource planning group. And our whole mission was to move people off spreadsheets, believe it or not. But it's just not reality, right? It's not reality in today's day and age, and certain processes do require spreadsheets. But as you start to look at that journey, again, as we talked about earlier, and you look at the breakdown of what's important to automate, eventually, and again, people trust spreadsheets, but we have to understand spreadsheets and human input and has human error, right? So there's always going to be a gauge or a margin for error when using spreadsheets. So what people have done in the past, or some of our customers have done, is they said, what type of information or what type of business process can I move off a spreadsheet that isn't going to put me at great risk, right? And so they start there and they can say, I look back, I have a great example of this. And if people can remember, we didn't always have spam filters in email, right? We didn't always have those. And so when they introduced the spam filter, this is just a good example of, well, do you want to get rid of all of these, perhaps it's a marketing email or whatever it might be. And some of those are worth looking at, but others are not. We didn't realize what we didn't have until we got spam filters, right? So we always would think, well, we can page through our own email and get rid of our own quote unquote spam. But the spam filter really helped with that efficiency. And that's the same process I would look at applying to procurement is what can you move to automation that's going to give you the less risk, less risk factor. Again, we don't even notice spam filters, right? We appreciate them. We're like, this is great. We can go in and we can look at who we want to let into our email and who we can't. But now we're dealing with exceptions and not looking through all of our emails and getting rid of emails we don't want to see in there. Same type of approach, I think, for direct procurement. Look at what you can automate that it has the less risk and then move from there.
Great. So, Lori, what closing thoughts do you have for us today?
Yeah, so again, as a closing thought, I want to leave everybody here with, look for a solution provider, again, as you're looking for direct procurement that brings all these essential direct procurement functions together on a single platform. one that can connect to your ERPs, your global trading partners, to bring you the data, applications, and again, that proven, field proven artificial intelligence so that you can move. I mean, when we talk spreadsheets to automation, the kind of end state is letting AI and machine learning do a lot of the work for you. So to transition your tactical or operational, if you will, to strategic. And again, look for something, a solution provider that has these broad and deep capabilities on one operating platform. And I think as you start to address your own, challenges in your journey, you'll start to understand that, there is some real value in evaluating and taking a look at new strategy, new technology.
Wow, thank you so much, Lori, for those fantastic insights. Really appreciate the time you took to explain this whole subject of direct procurement to us. Audience, also, thank you very much for your engagement and attendance. Do want to make a note here quickly that this presentation will be available on demand and can be viewed, or for that matter, reviewed at your convenience. There's a screen that shows you where you can go for more information from E2Open about direct procurement and the concept of trusted partners in that area. So go for it. And again, Lori, thanks very much. Audience, thank you very much. And everybody, have a great day.